Hi, Chris Duff over at Seri Land Capital Vacant Land Funding Partner. Today, wanted to go over some additional dispo tips in relation to that longer Claude project that I had for some troublesome properties that are being pretty difficult to move right now, and we've just been aggressively taking all of those tips and executing on them to try to find some way to move these things. So it mentioned, neighbor contact campaigns, which is nothing new, right? I think most people within the land industry have considered doing uh, neighbor um, neighbor contact campaigns, usually in the form of letters. But there are different strategies on how to do that, and I know there's some automated solutions like Lisa Jarrett has buyerfinder.io that kind of automates the process of just prepping letters for everybody within a certain radius. I like to be a little bit more targeted and creative with that, and so we're not always sending out neighbor letters. It's always kind of a debate because some properties, like, they just might move within like a week or two of listing, and or at least getting like significant activity. So I'm usually waiting on doing neighbor letters until maybe 3 to 4 weeks into listing a property, and it's maybe not moving as quickly as I would like, or maybe the markets are just changing on me so quickly that, like, okay, I would need to really take advantage of every avenue here. But yeah, it's usually not an immediate thing just because, like, it eats into margin, right? So you have to kind of gamble. Okay, is it worth spending additional funds here? Usually less than $1,000 for a neighbor letter campaign, but still, depending on how much equity you're putting into a deal, it might reduce your overall profit that you can get on it with potentially questionable benefits. So it's kind of a risk reward mentality here on when you might pull the trigger for doing neighbor letters. And some properties are going to be better suited to sell to a neighbor versus others. Obviously, if they're like, it's a nice tract of land next to somebody who owns a whole bunch of land in the area, and this would be like a nice addition for them, great, you can try to go after them. Whereas if it's just like a standard infill lot that people are kind of like one-off lot owners in an area, particularly if it's like HOA, like, it doesn't always make the most sense to think that neighbors are just going to be looking to scoop up extra land in the area. Not always, but there are some areas that are going to be more likely to neighbor buyers, and also price point as well. The cheaper the property is, probably going to get more interest. In our experience, we often found, like, yeah, neighbors always they want first look and they'll say they're interested, but when it comes time to actually put down a written offer, there's a lot of hemming and hawing going on as well. And we're kind of dealing with that with that larger Louisiana subdivide that we're doing at the moment, where there's been a neighbor who's been interested for a couple months now for one of the child parcels that borders their property. And they've just been not willing to put anything down on paper, and now they have like one more day to decide because we're actively doing clearing on all three of the child parcel lots, and we deliberately saved the last lot to be the one that they border directly, so that the broker can just pressure them more with, like, hey, like, as soon as we start doing work on this, like, you've lost your chance to purchase the property, or you're gonna have to go at a way higher price to purchase, because we're committed to the value add here. And so that's just an avenue where it's like, hey, you can start to, they see you're not just like blowing smoke in terms of, hey, we're going to sell all this type of stuff. It's like, hey, we're actively doing work here. You can see the cranes and the bulldozers and bush hogs and all that right outside where they live. And they're like, okay, yeah, these guys are serious here. So you either have to make a decision or move on from it. So that's another strategy you can use in situations like that, is start making a bunch of noise and start clearing when it actually makes sense to do that for certain properties. But then in terms of like actual letters and reaching out here, usually our strategy is kind of threefold within this. So I'll usually have my assistant prep a smaller radius of neighbors, definitely the ones who live right next door, and I usually want like a list of at least 20 to 30 people nearby. Obviously, the farther out they are, the less likely they're probably going to be that interested. And then we do a slightly larger radius. I don't actually have the exact numbers here, but just know, yeah, smaller for like the actual just neighbors here, and then a slightly larger radius for all LLCs within the area because they're more likely to be investor type of buyer. Sometimes they're just, individual sole proprietor or sole member LLCs, identity protection, whatever. Not that it really protects your identity. Any lawyer especially can find, even if you're in Nevada or Wyoming, all that, you think it's actually protected, but it's not. It's not confidential. So just FYI, there's no real advantage to doing an LLC within that state. Just do within your home state, unless you're planning to raise a whole bunch of money, or not even a whole bunch of money, but have investor involvement. Then you want to do Delaware. That's just an aside. Probably talk about that at more length in another pod. But finding these LLC buyers or owners in the area, rather, slightly larger radius, we'll do a separate letter campaign for them. We've actually had success doing that in the past as well. And then I also want to figure out who are all the local builders in the area too. And they're generally not going to be letters. I just want to cold call them and just try to figure out, hey, or email, how do we get in touch with these guys, and have like a multi-touch campaign across a couple of weeks to figure out, hey, is there an avenue that we could work together to, are you interested in potentially purchasing this property? And again, that's going to be most relevant for areas that are, infill lots, especially, and set up for single family residences, which a lot of our properties are, but, not always. And so we usually do like a 3-tiered campaign for that local, builder and LLC and neighbor outreach, and then send off the mail and try to provide our realtor as the main contact person versus calling us directly. But I'll still put my name in the business owner just in case they want to check who's the owner of this lot, if they really care. But hey, contact our broker. And now I've actually used AI even more to weave in the AI generated listing description into the neighbor letter, because we used to use like more generic copy and so forth, and now it's just a bit more sophisticated with developing that copy more uniquely oriented around that particular property. So that's our updated strategy on how we'll handle those. And we usually keep it below like $500 bucks, maybe closer to $300 total. And that one's still like a click to mail send out, just because I click to mail, I know still has like a poor UI. We initially got started there, but like it's, you don't need to do any bulk packaging or anything. You could even send like one person mailer out if needed. And I like the flexibility, and it's still a pretty cheap option for getting out some of these packages, and usually still pretty quick to work with. So that's our strategy on how we'll handle the neighbor letter piece and the multifaceted approach to it. It has worked with us in the past. It's definitely not 100% hit rate, but like, again, you can consider doing it right at the front end. As soon as you buy a property, or as soon as you anticipate buying a property, all titles cleared and everything, or wait until things are like maybe a little shakier and see if you can still get some hits, because initially listing on the market just wasn't able to get you the results that you wanted. Hopefully this neighbor letter strategy is helpful for you. Maybe even using clay.com. I thought about that when I saw Callan talking about it within her Accelerate to Automate program, where you might be able to find, you could use like fast people search and all of that, but maybe be able to skip trace a little bit easier, even phone numbers and emails for neighbors. To me, it's a little trickier of a strategy to do that. And like, yeah, if you really want to cold call, I mean, you can be as aggressive as you need to, like dispo, right? Like if things are not going well on that side, like you gotta pull off every last avenue to figure out how to sell your property. So letters are obviously the easiest to get out there in terms of a time perspective. Maybe most upfront work, but yeah, if you're having to try to call a whole bunch of numbers and so forth, that could introduce other time commitments, try to sort that out, but it might still work too. So that's just another adjunct method that we usually don't take advantage of, but the more I talk about it right now, it's something I should probably consider. So with that, seriously.capital for any of your funding needs, zero cost review of your land deals at Land Daily Diligence Facebook group, and then landpricer.ai for the most simple and accurate way to price land. Take care, everybody. Subscribe and share. Bye.